Good morning, Year 5. I hope you're all well and safe and with your families at home. We're on to chapters 13 and 14 of Skellig. The Viper's questions from last time around asked, what can you infer about the references to Skellig's unusual shoulders? So Michael, when he's feeling behind Skellig, feels that his shoulders are misshapen to what he'd normally expect. So he later asks his mum what shoulder blades are for. She answers, they say that shoulder blades are where your wings were when you were an angel. They say they're where your wings will grow again one day. And Michael asks, is that just a fairy tale for kids, isn't it? Who knows, says Mum. Then, as well in the book, there's lots of repeated, which means a motif. A motif is a repeating pattern of something. Lots of repeated references to birds. So, what do you think? Is Skellig an angel? A prediction question. What does the last page suggest will happen next? So that just depends on which bit you focus on. I took from it the discussion about the baby perhaps being an angel, and both Mina and the baby both being really central to this story. A summarising question. In what order did these things happen? So first out of that list in the chapter was Rasputin teaching the children about evolution. Secondly, Mrs. Dando spoke with Michael. And thirdly, the start of the next chapter, Dr. Death came to the house. Okay, off we go, chapter 13. The inference questions for today. Why did Dad decide Michael shouldn't go to school? Explain how the description of clearing the garden is enhanced by the choice of adjectives and verbs on page 44. And find that and highlight the word that is closest in meaning to trespasser. Off we go. Chapter 13. You're unhappy, she said. I stood there looking at her. The baby's back in hospital, I said. She sighed. She gazed at a bird that was wheeling high above. It looks like she's going to die, I said. She sighed again. Would you like me to take you somewhere, she said. Somewhere? Somewhere secret. Somewhere nobody knows about. I looked back at the house and saw Dad through the dining room window. I looked at Mina and her eyes went right through me. 5 minutes, she said. He won't even know you're gone. I crossed my fingers. Come on, she whispered, and I opened the gate and slipped out into the lane. Quickly, she whispered, and she bent low and started to run. At the end of the street, she turned into another back lane. The houses behind the walls were bigger and higher and older. The back gardens were longer and had tall trees in them. It was Crow Road. She stopped outside a dark green gate. She took a key from somewhere, unlocked it, slipped inside. I followed her in. Something brushed against my leg. I looked down and saw a cat that had come in through the gate with us. Whisper, said Mina, and she grinned. What? The cat's called Whisper. You'll see him everywhere. The house was blackened stone. The windows were boarded up. Mina ran to the door and opened it. There was a painted red sign over the door. Danger. Take no notice, she said. It's just to keep the vandals out. She stepped inside. Come on, she whispered. Quickly. I went in and Whisper entered at my side. It was pitch black in there. I could see nothing. Mina took my hand. Don't stop, she said, and she led me forward. She led me up some wide stairs. As my eyes got used to the gloom, I made out the shapes of the boarded windows, of the dark doorways and broad landings. We descended 3 stairways, past 3 landings. Then the stairs narrowed and we came to a final narrow doorway. The attic, she whispered. Stay very still in there. They might not want you to be there. They might attack you. What might? How brave are you? They know me and they know Whisper, but they don't know you. How brave are you? As brave as me? I stared at her. How could I know? You are, she said. You have to be. She turned the handle. She held her breath. She took my hand again. She led me inside, closed the door behind us. She hunched down on the floor. She pulled me down as well. The cat lay quietly at our side. Stay very still, she whispered. Stay very quiet. Just watch. We were right inside the roof. It was a wide room with a sloping ceiling. The floorboards were split and uneven. Plaster had fallen from the walls. Light came in through an arched window that jutted out through the roof. Glass was scattered on the floor below the window. You could see the rooftops and steeples of the town through it, and the clouds turning red as the day began to close. I held my breath. The room darkened and reddened as the sun went down. "What will happen?" I whispered. "Shh, just watch. Wait and watch." Then she trembled. "Look, look!" A pale bird rose from some corner of the room and flew silently to the window. It stood there, looking out. Then another came, wheeling once around the room, its wings beating within inches of our faces before it too settled before the window. I didn't breathe. Mina gripped my hand. I watched the birds, the way their broad, round faces turned to each other, the way their claws gripped the window frame. Then they went, flying silently out into the red dusk. "Owls," whispered Mina. "Tawny owls." And she looked right into me again and laughed. "Sometimes they'll attack intruders, but they saw you with me. You were with me. They knew you were okay." She pointed to the back wall, a gaping hole where some plaster and bricks had fallen in. "That's the nest," she said. "There's chicks in there. Don't go near, they'll defend them to the death." She laughed at my stunned silence. "Come on," she whispered, "be quick." And we left the attic and ran down the broad stairs and out of the house and into the garden. She locked the door and the garden gate, and we ran through the lanes to our wilderness. "Tell nobody," she whispered. "No," I said. "Hope to die?" she said. "What?" "Cross your heart and hope to die." "Cross my heart and hope to die." "Good," she said, and she ran away with Whisper at her heels. I stepped back through our gate, and there was Dad beyond the dining room window, stretching up to paint the walls. Chapter 14. I didn't go to school next day. I was having breakfast with Dad when I started trembling for no reason. He put his arm around me. "What about working with me today?" he asked. I nodded. "We'll get it all done for them, eh?" he said. "You and me together?" I heard him on the phone in the hall talking to school. "His sister," I heard him say. "Yes. So much all at once. State of distress. Yes, yes." I put some old jeans on. I stirred the green paint he was going to use on the dining room walls. I laid old sheets on the floor. "What shall I do?" I asked, as he stepped up onto the stepladders. He shrugged. He looked out through the window. "How about getting some of that jungle cleared?" he said. He laughed. "Get covered up first, though, and watch out for the tigers." I wore a pair of old gloves. I used an old pair of scissors to cut the stems that wouldn't snap. I dug down with a trowel to get the roots. Thistle thorns stuck in my skin. There was green sap all over me. I made a big pile of weeds and a heap of stones against the house wall. I found spiders dangling from my hair and clothes. Shiny black beetles scurried away from me. Centipedes squirmed down into the loosened soil from me. As the morning went on, I cleared a wider and wider space. Dad came out and we drank some juice together. We sat against the house wall and watched blackbirds come to where I'd been working. They dug into the soil, collected worms and insects for their young, flew over the gardens and rooftops to their nests. We talked about what we wanted to have out here: a pond, a fountain, a place Mum could sunbathe somewhere, to put the baby's playpen. "We'll have to cover the pond once she's crawling," he said. "Don't want any dangers in her way." We went back to work again. My arms were aching and my skin was stinging. Dust and pollen clogged my nose and throat. I crawled through the weeds, dug down into the earth, slashed and pulled at the stems. I dreamed of the baby crawling out here. She was strong and she kept on giggling and pointing at the birds. Then I saw how close to the garage I'd crawled, and I thought of the man in there, how he just sat there, how he seemed to be just wanting to die, waiting to die. I stood up and went to the garage door. I stood listening. There was nothing but the unusual scuttling and scratching. "You can't just sit there," I called. "You can't just sit like you're waiting to die." There was no answer. I stood listening. "You can't," I said. No answer. That afternoon we went to the hospital. As we drove out of the street in the car, I saw Mina sitting in the tree in her garden. She had a notebook in her lap and was writing or drawing. She looked at us and she waved. but she didn't smile. Strange one, that, said Dad. Yes, I murmured. In the hospital, the baby was in a glass case again. There were wires and tubes going into her. She was fast asleep. Mum said everything was fine. The doctors had told her the baby could come home again in a day or two. We looked down through the glass, and Mum put her arm around me. She saw blotches on my skin. She asked the nurses for some cream and rubbed it gently into me. The baby woke and looked straight into my eyes and screwed up her face like she was smiling. See, said Mum, she's going to get better for us, aren't you, my little chick? She closed her eyes again. Mum said she was to stay at the hospital tonight as well. Dad and I headed home. 27 and 53 again, he said, as we drove through the traffic. Yes, I said. Right, he said. A bit more work, then you can go round to the Chinese later. We drove into the street. Mina was sitting on the low wall to her front garden, reading a book. She watched us as we drew up, as we walked towards our door. I waved at her and she smiled. Take a break, said Dad. You can finish the garden tomorrow. Go on, go and see Mina. Okay, chapter 15, 16 next time around. So remember the Viper's question and rewind the video and pause at page 44 to help you answer that question, the second question. Okay, see you next time.